It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10. Our top story. A red card for Gary Lineker as the BBC takes their star presenter off the pitch for his criticism of the government. His fellow pundits pull out of Match of the Day in protest as they and opposition politicians attack the BBC's decision. Also tonight, nearly £500 million to try to stop small boats, the Prime Minister's summit pledge for France's president. The drivers stuck in the snow as the country shivers, and with more weather warnings on the way. Game over. We see the virtual warfare for real-life pilots and soldiers.
I feel very safe.
That's very kind. Thank you very much indeed.
The ultimate birthday present for Prince Edward, the new Duke of Edinburgh, following in the footsteps of his father. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages in our press preview from 10:30. Good evening. One of the most famous faces on British television says he has been taken off air by the BBC after he criticised the government over its small boats policy. Gary Lineker will step back from presenting Match of the Day, the corporation said. The decision was criticised by opposition politicians and, perhaps more importantly for his programme, his pundits, a succession of which say they also will refuse to appear. In the last hour, the BBC has said its football highlights will go ahead, but without any presenters. More on that in a moment. But first, our correspondent Ashna Huranag reports.
Within 3 days, Gary Lineker has gone from one of the BBC's most loved faces to one we won't be seeing anytime soon, taken off air for breaching the organisation's impartiality rules. We've said that we consider his recent social media activity to be a breach of our guidelines. The BBC has decided that he will step back from presenting Match of the Day until we've got an agreed and clear position on his use of social media. When it comes to leading our football and sports coverage, they say, Gary is second to none. We have never said that Gary should be an opinion-free zone or that he can't have a view on issues that matter to him, but we have said that he should keep well away from taking sides on party political issues or political controversies. A source close to the presenter, though, says this decision to step back wasn't his at all, instead one taken solely by the corporation. He's also not willing to apologise for his comments, so there's a standoff, and one that's causing quite the headache for those inside. In solidarity, former footballers and fellow broadcasters Ian Wright, Alan Shearer and Alex Scott are refusing to appear on the programme, a fallout that's snowballing when the corporation would have wanted it quashed.
I can see the BBC has a dilemma. It has a presenter who does want to say whatever he wants to say, but the BBC is saying, we have never said that Gary should be an opinion-free zone or that he can't have a view on issues that matter to him. And I think that is going all in sort of territory. It's very difficult to work out what can he and can't he say. So this is really, from the BBC's point of view, a terrible and rather sad mess at the moment.
It all started on Tuesday with this tweet criticising the government's latest migration plan and comparing its language to that used in 1930s Germany. The day after, the broadcaster, who's long supported refugees, doubled down on his views. And the government then hit back, with the Home Secretary branding his language offensive and his name propping up in the Commons.
Labour are borrowing from the Gary Lineker playbook. They are a party of goal hangers and the occasional left-wing striker.
Which yet again ignited a response. It's led to a sanction some see as appropriate.
I wouldn't want to silence anybody's opinions. I know he'll argue that he's not a politics presenter or a news presenter or so on, but he's clearly overstepped the mark here. I mean, what he said was grossly offensive, and he doesn't seem to be showing any contrition for that whatsoever.
Whilst colleagues of Lineker's are ramping up support in asking one of its most popular faces to step back, the BBC is stepping towards more division. Ashna Huranag, Sky News.
Well, our sports correspondent Rob Harris is at the BBC's headquarters tonight. And Rob, so many headaches for the BBC, the first of which is what to do with Match of the Day tomorrow. They do have a plan, though.
Yes, but they've had to rip up the format for a 6-decade footballing institution. There will be no presenter, there will be no pundits, and there will be no studio expert at all. If the BBC hoped that dropping Gary Lineker would diffuse this crisis, well, the mutiny amongst the pundits and his colleague certainly suggested otherwise. We had Alan Shearer and others announcing that they would not take part in a show without Gary Lineker on Saturday night. And it's unclear even if commentators will still provide the voice for those games, so the show can go ahead. Sky News is also just learning that players in the Premier League are forming a collective position about whether they go ahead and give interviews to the BBC. So a situation that has far-reaching ramifications within broadcasting, but far deeper so as well within the BBC. There's a sense in the building behind me of potential double standards. We've seen internal messages from within the BBC that point out if the BBC does care about impartiality, which this whole saga is about, well, why does their ultimate boss, the chairman of the BBC, Richard Sharp, get himself involved in facilitating loans for prime ministers? We've had this with the former Prime Minister Boris Johnson, with revelations that emerged in recent weeks that raised questions about his own position within the political sphere. So really questions go beyond the footballing aspect, the presentation aspect tonight, and these messages that we're understanding show the unease and that disquiet within the BBC. And as we see, this is something now that the BBC has to decide where it goes to next. The more immediate question is what happens to Match of the Day on Saturday night. Does it air? And then the BBC has to decide the future of its highest paid and most high-profile presenter, Gary Lineker, and whether he stays at the corporation.
Indeed, Rob, thank you very much for the moment. Now, it's quite a bill to try to end the small boat crossings on the French side, but it was agreed today by Rishi Sunak, meeting France's president in Paris. The Prime Minister announced the UK would give almost £500 million to the French over the next 3 years. It's a huge step up in support. In contrast, the UK committed £232 million to migrant agreements covering the past 9 years. Some of this money will go towards building a detention centre in northern France. It will also fund hundreds of new French patrol officers and provide enhanced patrolling technology like drones. Well, away from small boats, the two leaders also pledged to coordinate the supply of weapons to Ukraine and the training of Ukrainian Marines, and agreed to a new energy partnership and deal on civil nuclear energy. Our Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates, reports from Paris.
Rishi Sunak arriving in Paris, promising a new beginning. His predecessor couldn't say if Emmanuel Macron was a true ally.
Is France a friend or foe, Prime Minister?
This new Prime Minister in little doubt. The warmest of handshakes in the courtyard of the Élysée Palace. This, the first summit of its kind since 2018. Both leaders keen to show the world that this is a diplomatic bromance. A brief pose for the cameras, but soon alone together. The President and Prime Minister spent an hour in talks with no aides or officials in the room. Top of the agenda, small boats crossing the Channel. In the last decade, the UK has given over £250 million in funding to French authorities, and they still keep coming. Rishi Sunak believes his predecessors took the wrong approach.
If we're honest, the relationship between our two countries has had its challenges, but I believe today's meeting does mark a new beginning.
This means concrete action from the French to help stop small boats.
We're announcing a new detention centre in northern France, a new command centre bringing our enforcement teams together in one place for the first time, and an extra 500 new officers patrolling French beaches, all underpinned by more drones and other surveillance technologies that will help ramp up the interception rate.
The small print he didn't say on stage. That means nearly £500 million more funding to French authorities over the next 3 years. The president's tone warm, but says to return migrants to the EU, Britain must work well with Brussels.
Not an agreement between UK and France, but an agreement between UK and the EU, because Dublin Agreement are no more in a situation to be implemented. So this is something now to be negotiated.
Rishi Sunak closed this summit declaring the Entente was renewed. And he's certainly succeeded in transforming the tone of the relationship with the UK's closest neighbours. But he needs to convince the country and his party that this is the right approach, that collaboration doesn't involve more compromise than confrontation, which was the way Boris Johnson and Liz Truss did it. And that has been made harder by the fact he's just written a cheque to the French for £500 million. The pomp and platitudes of a summit leave big questions unanswered. How will the detention centre work? Will more money finally mean fewer crossings? Rishi Sunak's reset continues. Next stop, the United States. Being popular with fellow leaders doesn't mean votes at home, however. For that, grand promises need to come good and quickly. Sam Coates, Sky News, Paris.
To the weather, and there's no immediate respite in sight over the heavy snow which has blanketed much of the UK. Last night, drivers were left stranded on the M62 for hours, and they weren't alone. Well, there are yellow weather warnings for snow and ice in place tomorrow across much of England and Scotland. Our Midlands correspondent Becky Johnson reports from Derbyshire.
You know it's bad when even a snowplough gets stuck. Here on the A53 in Derbyshire, all they could do was try to dig it out.
Because of the plough, there's nowhere to plough it to, so then you just ride up, and then that's because the gritters got stuck.
In the end, a local farmer came to their rescue, and they had to admit defeat. Further down the road, over the border in Staffordshire, they were trying to clear it from the other end. But they've been out here since the snow fell on Thursday evening.
These are six-wheel drive. He was in six-wheel drive and they weren't going anywhere. You couldn't see anything. It was frightening, really, like Armageddon, really.
And drivers who had attempted it soon regretted it. Even after several hours of trying, this section of the road is proving impossible to get through, even with a snowplough. Abandoned cars lined the roads after the snow came thick and fast. On the M62, drivers who left Manchester late on Thursday were trapped in their cars overnight as the motorway ground to a halt.
We've managed to keep the heaters on, and before we left, I've got my 15-year-old son here with me. I think he thought I was being dramatic, but I was like, we need to take blankets, we need to take coats just in case.
In the Peak District, some people were snowed in, with Derbyshire Police warning not to attempt to travel in the area. Airports were affected too. In Birmingham, they had to clear the runway to keep planes moving. In Northern Ireland, more than 200 schools were closed due to the weather, with many more shut across large parts of Northern England, Wales and Scotland.
Sat on there with the little trees.
For people like Charlotte, who found the roads to her home in Staffordshire blocked, the only option was to travel on foot.
So what can you do? Just sit and wait for ploughs and snow blowers to come through and then wait for spring.
But it could get worse before it gets better. More snow is forecast in places, and as all this melts, ice will be the biggest risk for large parts of the UK this weekend. Becky Johnson, Sky News in Staffordshire.
A witness at the trial of the man accused of murdering Olivia Pratt-Korbel says the 9-year-old's alleged killer visited her on the night of the shooting. The jury also heard how Olivia's brother held his sister after she was shot, but he said he knew it was all over. Caterina Vitozzi reports from Manchester Crown Court.
On the night she died, Olivia Pratt-Korbel was home in her pyjamas with her mum, her older brother Ryan and sister Chloe. Ryan Korbel told police he heard 3 loud bangs from outside in the road. The next thing I heard was footsteps across the landing. It was Olivia. She was running downstairs screaming, "Mum, I'm scared." The jury heard him in a statement say he saw Joseph Nee slumped injured in their hallway and a gunman outside trying. What he didn't realise in that moment was that his little sister had been shot in the chest, hit by a bullet that had first gone through their front door and her mother Cheryl's hand. He said, "My mum put Liv in my arms and told me to keep pressure on her chest. Her lips had gone blue. She wasn't even bleeding out of the gunshot wound. I knew it was over. The jury were also played the witness statement of a woman who can't be named for legal reasons, but in it the woman told the police that she had known Thomas Cashman for a few years and that at times their relationship had been intimate. She told police that on the night that Olivia was shot, she was at home asleep and woke up to Thomas Cashman repeatedly tapping her on the leg and asking her for clean clothes. I could just hear him saying, "Give me a pair of pants." She told the police he was very nervous. Do you know what I mean? I've never seen him like that. That's why I felt like there was something wrong. She said she heard Thomas Cashman, who's 34, say the name Joey Nee and later say, "I've done Joey." Thomas Cashman denies going to this witness's house and all of the charges against him, including the attempted murder of Joseph Nee and the murder of 9-year-old Olivia. Katerina Vitozzi, Sky News, Manchester.
Last summer, the predictions were clear. The UK was set for recession this winter. That now looks unlikely, but the picture is of stagnation instead. The economy grew by 0.3% in January, more than the 0.1% that had been predicted. However, looking back across the last 2 years, we see a changing picture. 3 significant dips in the last year after the rebound that followed the end of lockdown. Our business correspondent Paul Kelso reports from Cambridge on the factors holding back growth.
In the deep freeze could be the future of medicine. Human cells grown to order in a lab outside Cambridge that's pushing the boundaries of biotech.
What BitBio has created is a process by which we can recreate every human cell type. There's really no limit to how big this company could become.
The company's already valued at $200 million, the sort of business that could give a boost to flatlining GDP. But the founder sees barriers to expansion in Britain.
They put a new building up and, the space is snapped up immediately. It's extremely competitive. There's constraints when it comes to, of course, infrastructure and support of infrastructure, whether it's manufacturing. Elsewhere, you would get governments that pay for your manufacturing infrastructure.
To maximise the potential of Cambridge and Oxford, government had planned to link the cities with the Oxcam Arc, a new road, railway and 1 million homes in a British answer to Silicon Valley. But local opposition means only the railway line survives.
You cannot put a California-sized biohub on an East Anglian market town without doing a bucket load of damage. The point is not no growth, the point is good growth.
If the UK is going to be a global leader in the knowledge economies of the future, it won't do it without Cambridge or Oxford or London. Perhaps a bigger challenge, though, is trying to take what works here and replicate it in parts of the country that have been left behind.
Travel 200 miles north to Rochdale and you find different barriers to growth. Productivity and life expectancy are below average here. Greater Manchester's mayor says that gap is holding the economy back.
People have likened it to a plane flying on one engine, and that kind of approach to overheating London and the southeast has taken us so far, but it's creating a sense of a country where people don't feel that they're getting, if you like, equal treatment.
He's backing Atom Valley, an industrial zone to attract advanced manufacturing. But that will take skills, and the production line for those starts here.
I've been looking around for apprenticeships closer to home, and it's like Manchester and stuff. So if they are closer to home, like Rochdale, it would be amazing.
Do you think you can fulfil your ambitions round here?
Oh yeah, 100%. Born in the right place at the right time, I suppose.
Britain hasn't got one growth problem, it's got several, and fixing them won't be easy. The Chancellor has a chance to try in next week's budget. Paul Kelso, Sky News.
An unborn baby was amongst the victims of a shooting at a Jehovah's Witness building in Hamburg last night. Police have identified the gunman as a 35-year-old who had been a member of the congregation. 6 people were killed in the attack before the gunman took his own life. Our Europe correspondent Siobhan Robbins reports from Hamburg.
In Hamburg, they're bringing out the dead. People shot where they worshipped. Victims of a man in the shadows, this figure by a window. The hail of bullets shows he had no mercy. An unborn baby among those gunned down inside a Jehovah's Witness centre.
Ich bin Anwohner hier oben und habe laute Schüsse gehört.
I'm a resident up here and I heard loud gunshots. So I went to the window to get an idea of the situation. Then I saw that a man was shooting out of the window with a firearm. There were people being carried out, and there were probably 25 shots at least that I heard.
Shots were reported here around 9 p.m. Police arrived in a matter of minutes, interrupting an horrific attack. 7 dead, including the 7-month-old unborn child, whose mother survived. Shell-shocked neighbours say officers searched for accomplices before confirming the lone gunman had shot himself.
We got a message from the police that we shouldn't leave the house, and 3 policemen came and searched all the houses here. They were probably looking for a fugitive, but afterwards they found the one who is now dead.
The man responsible, named as Philip F., also once worshipped here before he left. Police say the sports shooter fired more than 100 rounds of ammunition at his former group.
Through the window, the shooter shot into the building, got into the building through the window and continued to shoot.
Police said that the gunman was previously investigated after they received an anonymous tip that he may not be suitable to bear firearms. But when they visited him, they found he hadn't broken any rules. And at that point, legally, they said they couldn't take it any further. Some will question if this could have been prevented. But for now, this city mourns, still reeling from one of the worst crimes in its recent history. Siobhan Robbins, Sky News, Hamburg.
Some other news now, and regulators in California have taken the unusual step of shutting down all branches and head office of a bank. State officials closed the doors of Silicon Valley Bank earlier today. In a statement, they said all branches will reopen on Monday. Iran and Saudi Arabia have agreed to re-establish diplomatic relations and reopen their embassies. After 7 years of tension, the breakthrough was agreed following negotiations led by China. Now, I just want to let you know, on Monday, we'll have a special debate on the race to become Scotland's First Minister. Our political editor, Beth Rigby, will be joined by the 3 candidates, Kate Forbes, Humza Yousaf and Ash Regan. That's next Monday at 7 p.m. It's an appeal that might resonate for thousands of potential army recruits who love their online gaming. Join the military and keep on playing. But it could increasingly be a reality, for training at least, as our science and technology editor, Tom Clark, reports.
0107 northeast.
War has just broken out over the Lake District. A helicopter's been shot down and the situation is escalating.
OK, I'm going to start the convoy again.
It's an exercise, of course, but one that's being carried out in an entirely virtual environment that promises to change the way we train our military.
It allows us to have one single synthetic environment which can be streamed to anywhere in the world, so players can be in different parts of the world. It replicates the real-world physics, it replicates the real-world terrain.
5x5.
Without using real fuel or ammunition, Typhoon pilots fly over the same virtual terrain.
Jackpot acknowledged.
Being used by ground troops. Drone and satellite intelligence teams feed them with information in real time. Using simulators for military training is nothing new, but massive improvements in cloud computing power, artificial intelligence and machine learning software, as well as hardware like augmented reality headsets, now make it possible to bring large numbers of people into a simulated environment of the real world and allow them to train together in real time. The computing power is large enough for AI to represent 60,000 civilians in the environment, which alter their behaviour individually according to the battle around them.
In this team, all of them need to see different things, but they need to see it in a common operating picture. Keeping that up to date in real time with 60,000 AI entities running around and adapting to an emerging situation is a complex computational task, so we are the plumbing that sits underneath that.
If it looks like a computer game, well, that's because it is. Haydian has worked with the developers of games like Minecraft to help scale their virtual worlds. But isn't real war very different?
It's important that the armed forces keep up with the expectations of a younger generation, where they're now very versatile on this equipment. My worry is, because of pressures on budgets, that we will see the flight simulators, we will see these digital classrooms take over from getting out into the field and doing real-life experience.
But in a world of hypersonic missiles and autonomous drones, that experience is changing too. For better or worse, computers already fight much of our battles. Makes sense to train with them too. Tom Clark, Sky News, Lancashire.
Now, it could be a clear signal from the King to his family about the value in which he holds hard work. That was the suggestion of one historian we spoke to today over the decision to make Prince Edward and his wife Sophie the new Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh. They are famously amongst the family's most hard-working members, as our royal correspondent Laura Bundock reports.
They've just been made Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh, so where else to mark the moment?
You're my favourites. Oh, you say that to all of them, don't you? Absolutely.
All smiles, arriving at the city chambers and meeting members of the Ukrainian community.
Happy birthday. Oh, thank you. That's very kind. Thank you very much indeed.
As birthday presents go, this takes some beating. One of the country's most senior titles, now gifted from a big brother to a little brother.
I think that, if you like, King Charles wants to show, to reflect the importance of people who are working for the monarchy and, who knows, perhaps by implication, sideline a little people who aren't.
And with the Duke of York and the Duke of Sussex no longer working royals, it recognises Prince Edward's growing role and responsibilities. His father, Prince Philip, was the last Duke of Edinburgh, setting up the award scheme which bore his name. Huge shoes to fill. And significantly, Prince Edward can't pass the title to his son James, now Earl of Wessex.
The palace are thinking creatively about these types of matters at the moment, and perhaps how we're moving towards a more role-based monarchy where you get titles as a result of your role in the monarchy rather than as of right.
The move honours the wishes of the late Queen and Prince Philip, but it was ultimately the King's decision, and another sign of what his slimmed-down monarchy will look like. Laura Bundock, Sky News.